Welcome to A Brief History Conspiracy.
This week, 9/11, false flag operations.
So, please like and subscribe to the video. It really does help us out. Okay, so this week, false flag operations. Now, I'm going to tell you, I've got a metaphor that explains what a false flag is, but I wouldn't tell you what it was earlier in front of my wife because I think it'll make her angry. But here's my metaphor.
Go on.
Right?
I'm
So,
curious.
A false flag operation is a bit like you have a very pretty girlfriend and I fancy you. Right?
Yep.
So I start putting out rumours that you're having an affair. Okay? And I even set up situations that would again make it look like you're having an affair.
Okay.
I might bribe a young lady to send you messages on Facebook to make it look like you're having an affair. And then I swoop in and basically I'm a shoulder to cry on and I'm like, oh, is he? Yeah, he's having an affair, what a git. And then I bang your girlfriend. Alright?
Yeah, that's kind of similar to a false flag. Yeah, I'll go with that.
But then you split up. And this is where it gets even better. You guys split
Right.
up. Alright? And I take advantage of your girlfriend. I then, because I do a bit of psychology as my day job, and so I'm then, let's say I'm a counsellor, I will then charge you for counselling. Right?
Okay.
So I will make you pay me to help you with the situation I caused. Right?
Yeah,
In this
okay.
situation, I'm America,
Yeah.
you're a false country, and your girlfriend is your natural resources. Yeah.
Yeah,
See,
that does
good.
work. It does work. It's a good analogy. Very good analogy.
But I still think my wife and women in general might be angry about that, but I can't. This
Yeah,
is
it's not
why I'm
really
possibly.
sexist.
This is why
It's
I'm
not-
possibly a sexist though, because I think she'll be angry at me, but I don't know why.
No, I don't. It's not really sexist.
I think it's okay.
It's not belittling women.
Obviously, this series, we're doing our second series now of Brief History Conspiracy, and we are focusing this year on September 11. And we're going to start off with, could September 11 incident? I want a better word than that, don't I?
Could 9/11.
Could 9/11 have been a false flag operation orchestrated by the American government? Now, we're not going to go into September 11 necessarily today, but we're going to talk about the history, and then we're just going to talk about could or would the American government have done this? Now, we're not totally picking on the Americans. We'll say initially as well. The British invented false flag operations. We did it first, and we did it better.
History is littered with false flag operations from
yeah.
many countries.
Exactly. You mentioned sinking the Lusitania.
Yep. World War One. Yeah.
There's the Suez Canal incident following World War II, when America made us give back our empire, and we just thought, we'll just try to keep the Suez Canal. So we basically orchestrated a war between Egypt and Israel, and then put a peacekeeping force in the middle, and we completely set that whole incident up.
Yep.
So we can do it. We're good at it too.
Yeah.
So we got a series of questions. First of all, would the American government take advantage of a situation for its own gain? So something happens, would the American government basically lie and then take advantage of it to start a war with somebody, for example? What do you think?
Yes.
Yes. And
There's not really any.
Yeah.
Those who fail to study history fail to know the answer to that question.
Well, to be honest, we have a few examples, but probably the most famous one is the USS Maine.
Yeah.
So the Spanish-American War. So back in 1898, the Spanish still had an empire. You know, they were still the thing. They still controlled many of the islands in the Caribbean and in the Pacific and all this sort of thing. They still had those islands, but they still also had sail ships like like sails and cannons and this. The Americans had actually started building heavy iron engines and proper what we'd consider
battle. Military ships in today's world. Yes.
So if we say the official version first, then the Cuban War of Independence was kicking off in 1898, and the Americans decided to send the USS Maine over to Havana port to protect the American assets. I don't quite know what that means. I don't know how a warship in the harbour is going to protect their assets, but anyway, that's what they did. But then it basically, while it was in the port, it exploded. Right? So the official, at the time, the inquiry said that it hit a Spanish mine and destroyed the ship. Right? It was 260 men died that day. Mostly the sort of like the crew, the low down crew, because
of course.
the explosion happened at the back of the boat. That's where all the crew quarters were. The officers' quarters are at the front of the boat, and a lot of them survived. 89 men survived. Right? I saw a YouTube channel that said all of the officers survived, which isn't true, and that the officers watched the explosion from the land, which also isn't true. but anyway,
Okay.
a lot of YouTube videos.
Yeah, you've got to be careful with some of the information provided online, but
unfortunately. So the Board of Inquiry said that. There was the New York Journal led with this byline of "Remember the Maine, to hell with Spain," and they ran with that. Public opinion turned in the favour of conflict with Spanish, and the Americans took all the Spanish islands that are anywhere near America. But they had, like I say, they had these gunships. The Spanish still had sailboats, so they're trying to go with the wind, and the Americans were just able to circle them and do whatever they wanted, and just blew them to pieces. They took a bunch of islands in the, like I say, in the Caribbean. They took a bunch of islands. It was really one of the first big steps for the Americans becoming a global power, and it really shored up the naval.
It probably was one of the first big ones that.
But they actually knew at the time, but several research things have been done since. So they say this was almost certainly an accident. There have been a lot of conspiracy websites say that it was done on purpose, that the Americans actually blew up their own ship in the harbour. And that might be true. They might have done this because they really wanted to go to war with the Spanish. They just did. And that could be true. But I also think it's just as likely. Apparently there's a point, they think there was a fire in the coal.
Right, okay.
In the coal parts. And apparently this cheap coal they used to use actually gave off this like a mist that was really flammable. So that caught fire. The magazine for the shells and things, for the guns, is next to the turbines and the engines, which seems to be like a terrible design flaw to me. So when there was a fire there, it set off the magazine and blew up half the ship. Right? About 40 years later, they actually came and they raised the boat up, took it out into the ocean, because obviously it was just sat in the middle of the Havana harbour. Took it out in the middle of the ocean and sank it again. They didn't stop to have a look or investigate what had actually happened. They just took it out and sank it. A couple of submarines have gone down since and had a look, and so
it's weird that they didn't choose that time to investigate. To me, though, normally when you're disposing of evidence, you follow that modus operandi. When you're actually interested in whether it was a false flag or not, you investigate.
You get rid of the evidence.
Well, no. But yeah, if you actually thought it was some kind of accidental incident that had occurred that had caused the sinking of the ship, as you'd mentioned, you would probably investigate. If you knew it was a false flag, you bury the evidence.
Yeah, you'd want to make sure that one of your other ships didn't blow up.
Precisely.
But he's also telling me that the 89 crew that survived didn't know exactly what had happened. They didn't know there was a fire, or didn't know that
that's
there was
also true.
So I think the Americans generally knew. Or, like I said, there is a possibility that they blew up their own ship. That is possible.
Yeah, I think that's quite possible.
I think it's just as likely, though, there's an accident that the Americans then took full advantage of. They lied, and they took advantage of it. And they started a war that they really want to say. So, would the Americans lie and take advantage of a situation if it occurred to get what they want?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Very much so. So, question 2. Would the Americans fabricate an attack so that they could start a war that they wanted to start?
Oh, I think yes, but I suppose we should try and look for an incident in history that sort of corroborates that viewpoint. And you don't have to look very far, to be honest. No. So the Gulf of Tonkin incident. The official theory, or the official story for the Gulf of Tonkin incident was back in August '64. The USS Maine was supposedly attacked, I believe, on the 2nd of August. In the primary attack by 2 Vietnamese gunships, and then supposedly attacked again 2 days later, I believe.
Yeah. President Johnson apparently actually stood up and said this is what had happened as well at the time.
But I suppose we should say why he was lying in front of everyone.
I think the Cold War was pretty much in full swing at this point.
Yes, certainly was.
We wanted to fight the Russians everywhere we could, but we didn't want to fight them head on because that would cause a nuclear war.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of proxy wars.
Yeah, it makes sense to have proxy wars through other nations.
The Russians were getting involved in Vietnam, so we wanted to get involved, and the Americans wanted to get involved. So it looks like they fabricated an attack. The true events on that day were that the Tonkin saw 2 gunboats, Vietnamese gunboats, fired at them, warning shots. The Vietnamese then struck back, and then there was a conflict. A couple of Vietnamese people died. No American injuries, no American deaths.
No, they didn't sink the Maddox, did they? Though.
No, it wasn't. It was barely touched.
No, it wasn't, was it? Yeah, no. I seem to remember.
No,
it wasn't like the
injuries.
Lusitania back. The sinking of the Lusitania at the offset of World War One.
No deaths.
No deaths. But a massive war then ensued between America and Vietnam,
which had
cost
many
millions
deaths.
of lives, with many deaths, and cost millions of taxpayers' money, even back in the 60s.
You know, when they pulled out, they decided actually that this is a terrible war. Why did we get involved in this? And they pulled out. They were trying to get all the helicopters onto the aircraft carriers, but they didn't have the space. So all they had to do, they just had to push the helicopters off the aircraft carriers. So they would fly in, get everybody off, and push it off so that the next helicopter could land. It's incredibly wasteful, and it's just.
I didn't realise they did that. So that's how much.
Fishbowl Wonder when he's taking the piss out of the Americans.
Yeah.
Vietnam, we lost that one. Korea, that was a draw. You lost that. You lost the Vietnamese war quite badly.
Yeah, I didn't realise they were pushing helicopters off of the aircraft carriers.
Yeah, it was such a mess trying to get out. So on the incident as well. So the incident was that Johnson has stood up and said the Vietnamese fired first. Wasn't true.
Yeah.
The Americans fired first. They also stood up and said that there was a second attack 2 days later. Turned out also not true. There was no second incident.
This is Lyndon Johnson, I assume, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a Mason, wasn't he, Lyndon Johnson? Interestingly. Freemason.
Apparently. We'll go to that because I think you can trace that. How many American presidents were Masons?
There's a lot. There's a lot.
Few.
There's a lot of geography in America that has Masonic symbolism in it as well.
Yeah.
And it's it's prevalent, shall we say? Story for another day.
So anyway, that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but this is actually fact. The Secretary of State, Robert McNamara, came out in his memoirs and admitted it. Completely admitted it, that they made up the second attack and the Americans did fire first. So President Johnson lied. And that is the resolution that started Vietnam War, started the American involvement in Vietnam, is called the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. It's a direct link
to that incident, which has been proven to be fraudulent.
It was going to be a complete lie.
Yeah.
Completely fabricated and started a war.
You could almost argue false flag operations in their very, very, very nature are terrorist acts, because you are attempting to coerce another nation into meeting your demands or engaging sanctions on them or what's the word? Or enacting war against a country based upon an incident that the events didn't occur as you say they were happening.
It's also the idea is to build that fear, isn't it? The idea is to build fear at home, or anger, or whatever, so that the people let you do what you want to do. So they wanted to invade Spain, Spanish islands, but they knew they couldn't do it without the American people on their side. So the USS Maine. They wanted to get involved in Vietnam, but knew the American people probably weren't that keen. So they invented this attack, and then the people got enraged and scared even, and that's what allowed them to do it. So
yeah. And I suppose what's good about the Gulf of Tonkin incident is it's a proven false flag. I mean, people believe Pearl Harbor may also have been a false flag operation, as prior to that, no Americans wanted any involvement in World War II. After the Pearl Harbor incident, 1 million Americans signed up for the American military to go and fight the Germans. So there's quite strong evidence that Pearl Harbor was a false flag operation, but it's not actually proven
I've never thought
to
it
the
was
extent of the Gulf of Tonkin.
That's one instance. I know we'll talk about this now as well. Everything becomes a false flag, and lots of things. You know, anytime there's anything that happens now in America, somebody will come out and say this is a false flag. And they're not all. I actually don't think that was a false flag. I actually do believe more the historical thing. Hitler didn't want America involved, but he was supplying the British. So there is evidence to say that the Germans shipped a load of gold to Japan as a bribe. The idea being Japan would attack America.
Yeah, but how long do ships take to get from Japan to Pearl Harbor?
And
they weren't tracked on radar anywhere en route.
Yeah, because radar was crap back then, I mean. We'd only just given
them... Alright, that's we'd only just given them radar. It was in its early days. Yeah. But I'm just saying that no one spotted these Japanese warships.
Yeah, but we spent months wandering around it, and the Pacific's really big.
Oh, it is really big, but I don't know.
They weren't expecting
maybe not so much as a false flag as to maybe just complicit negligence.
It was a complete surprise attack.
They knew they were coming earlier than they actually admitted, and let it happen in order to get the American people behind the involvement in World War II.
And then I think
maybe
the Japanese and Germany completely misunderstood what America was, and completely underestimated them. Germany thought America won't fight a conflict on two fronts. They won't fight in Europe and in the Pacific. They just won't. Japan wanted to start a fight. They were bribed to attack America, but I generally don't think they had any clue what would actually happen. I think they probably thought they could put their hands up and go, oh, we're sorry, here's a couple of islands or something, and then that would be it. But obviously, that's not what happened.
No,
so, I mean, I think that's a complete... So I don't believe that was a false flag operation. Saying that...
It's possible. It's still plausible that it was a false flag.
And when we talk about what we're going to talk about next, Operation Northwoods, you have to start getting to a point where... I've had people on our channel, when I've said about we're doing 9/11, say my government wouldn't do that. Operation Northwoods basically underlines that yes, they would.
Yes, it completely does, yes.
Completely. Cold War, full swing. Cuba turns Russian. Turns communist. Americans very unhappy about this.
No, yes, given the proximity.
The CIA, I love the CIA Operation Mongoose. How about that? It's brilliant. They tried to either kill or humiliate him, and one of the things they tried to do was get estrogen into his meals. The idea being that they would, his beard would fall out and he'd basically develop tits. And he'd be so humiliated that the communist thing would resume would collapse.
Fall over. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, they tried to get on one of his ex-girlfriends to kill him. They tried to do all sorts. They tried to do like little exploding seashells that were going to be put on the beaches by Navy SEALs because he'd quite like to wander up and down the beaches apparently. So that was a plan. They were thinking that if they do enough of them, he'd step on one and so they were trying to do all these clandestine...
They've got some crazy little methods to try and eradicate or humiliate him.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
But the Joint Chiefs went a different way. The Joint Chiefs obviously being the heads of the four major branches of the armed forces in America, led by a bloke called Leminitzer.
Yes, Leminitzer.
Yeah,
it is Leminitzer.
He was the chairman.
To be honest.
They went a more... The one example I heard was basically they have a hammer and a nail philosophy, and Cuba was a nail that they needed, and they just needed to hit it with a hammer. So they came up with an idea of, we'll just bomb him and kill him. And then somebody pointed, that's not really the American way. We don't really do that. We're supposed to be the good guys. So then, okay, we won't bomb him. Instead, we'll... It's so... What they actually came up with is so mental. It's actually hard to say with a straight face, but they actually genuinely planned these things. So one was, they would do fake attacks by Cuba against US and allies. So they was going to maybe attack an American ship. But it's okay because they did keep repeatedly saying in this plan that it could be real or it could be fake. It doesn't really matter. So we can mock it, or we can do it for real.
For real, it's far away.
It's like, oh God. So they would attack like naval ships. They would attack their allies, but blame Cuba.
I believe during the Cuban Missile Crisis, this was the first time that America also planned to fly passenger planes into its own landmarks, and then blame Cuba for the incident, and then invade and occupy Cuba.
Yep, that was also part of this plan.
Does this sound familiar?
Yes. I mean, it's almost like we're talking about this for a reason.
Yeah, there might be a recent event that we might think is a false flag operation.
But I say this Operation Northwoods goes even further. They plan to kill Cuban refugees in the Gulf of Mexico and blame the Cubans. So they were genuinely planning to murder people. But you'd think, oh well, yeah, but we're killing Cubans, that makes it alright. No, they also planned to fake terror attacks or to stage terror attacks on US
American
soil,
citizens.
shooting Americans, shooting Cubans, bombing them in Miami. And this was planned. They'd even gone as far as deciding where would be the best place to attack.
Yeah, it's yes, and it's also now been officially released, hasn't it, from the Official Secrets Act? So you can freely view these plans.
Oh yeah, I like that as well, because the Americans, so some bureaucrat released all this information, all these documents, not realising people would be quite upset that their government planned this, and they just thought, yeah, but we didn't do it. Like that makes it all right.
So you planned it. So how many of the times have you planned it and done it and not told us?
Yeah. It goes in for they plan to sink a cruise ship in Cuban waters, full of Americans. But if they do it in Cuban waters, then we can say that we're talking about Lusitania. If that's, it seems a bit similar.
They seem quite similar.
The whole point of this was to try to get the American people on board
with invading,
and the international community as well on board with invading Cuba. I almost said Iraq then. That would have been a Freudian slip.
Invading and occupying, Cuba.
Yeah. And that's the point. Luckily, this plan was passed by the chiefs, the Joint Chiefs, and passed up to the president for authorization. And JFK went off his nut.
Yeah, and told him, yeah.
Yeah, he sacked the chair of the Joint Chiefs. I'm not going to try to say his name again. He sacked him. He was in there. It's disgusting. It's created a void between him and the military, JFK and the military, for years.
Yep.
And we all know what happened to JFK.
Johnson agreed with the military-industrial complex, with the Joint Chiefs, with the military at the time, and followed through on their false flag plan.
Yep.
JFK told them no and ended up dead.
Yep.
Interesting.
Coincidence.
I don't know. It's just a curious point, isn't it? So that one was a false flag that never happened, and the president that stopped it ended up dead. But the presidents that did the previous false flag, that went through with the operation, that's proven false flag operation, was fine.
Yeah, he survived to a ripe old age.
Yeah, interesting.
Right.
It's almost like the president doesn't really have much power.
I think we already know that, don't we? Because they all say they're going to tell us what about aliens, and then they all get into power, and they all go, nobody will tell me.
Yeah. Well, the president's only a temporary employee.
Well, exactly.
So he doesn't even get told about a lot of these black, deep,
That's like,
deep,
it's above
deep,
your
dark
pay grade,
operations.
sir.
Yeah.
That's, it's like, one day maybe we'll find out. But
that's why you see a lot of continuity in government behind the front line. So the president changes, the vice president changes, but then a lot of the same face people remain beneath that.
Yeah, it's like in this country, isn't it? Going to
Secretary of State, the Joint Chiefs, so all the people.
The Joint Chiefs don't change. The lawyers, the judges, the High Court Supreme judges.
Yeah.
They don't change. When one of them passes away, that's a big deal. That like the politicians go and think, oh, we could get one of ours in. We could get a Democrat in, or we could get a Republican in. It's a big deal when a Supreme Judge dies. I remember watching a West Wing episode, and that was, I think, one of these things that died, and that was about 3 episodes just about we could get someone in here. This would be great.
Well, yeah. I mean, interestingly, with September the 11th, 2001, there was a document that was written in the late 90s called the Project for the New American Century. But interestingly, there's quite a few interesting characters that we'll go into more detail on. One of them being Rabbi Dev Zakim, who was a member of the Project for the New American Century, that wrote a document in the late 90s about the securing America's stronghold on the world for the forthcoming 100 years, for the next century, in which
ambitious.
ambitious, in which they call for a new Pearl Harbor type catalyzing event that will allow them to maintain dominance over the world for the next 100 years.
We can either do this nice and slowly and have a nice steady plan, or we need an event to happen that can allow us to do it all a lot quicker.
Yeah. And then you see a lot of the people that sat on this committee, the Project for the New American Century, are members of the Council of Foreign Relations. The Rabbi Dev Zakim is particularly interesting, as he was sworn in as Pentagon Comptroller on in May 2001, several months prior to September the 11th, which is in charge of the accounts and bookkeeping section of the Pentagon, which $2.3 trillion disappeared from.
Yeah, he pooped on that. He did badly in that
which
job.
Donald Rumsfeld announced was missing on September the 10th. The accounts and bookkeeping section of the Pentagon was destroyed on September the 11th, as was the only backup in Building 7 of the World Trade Center complex.
Yep. We will be coming back to the money.
There's some very interesting things about Mr. Zakim.
Yeah. I was just saying about something about his previous job as well, that he was to do with... He was a CEO of a company that worked on...
Yes, another interesting tidbit. Systems Planning Corporation International, which dealt with remote control flying of aircraft.
Yeah.
And determination systems if the navigation equipment was to fail.
Christ. Anyway, wasn't Donald Rumsfeld and all people like this involved in this group as well, this think tank or something?
I'm not sure if Rumsfeld was in the Project for the New American Century, but he's definitely one of the names I'd be investigating. I'm sure. I think, does he sit on the Council of Foreign Relations himself? I know Dick Cheney does. Dick Cheney's part of the David Rockefeller. There's some very interesting families that are part of the Council of Foreign Relations, and I believe that they're the vetting agency for each next Prime Minister. And if they say yay or nay. For the next president, sorry, and they say yay or nay to anybody that comes along, basically. And if they don't want them, they then disappear, basically, if they don't want them out of the running very easily. Like Bernie Sanders, for example.
Oh, he's got no chance.
No, but he's somebody that they would
it's only because of the internet he's got any chance at all.
Yes.
And if it wasn't for the internet, you wouldn't know who Bernie Sanders was. It's only because he can go on things like Joe Rogan and stuff like that we even know who he is. Otherwise, he would just be a side character but actually he's got half a chance.
He does. He is very socialist, Mr. Sanders. I'm not sure I agree entirely with his view, because there's a point, isn't there?
There's a few bits,
Yeah, I think the reality in this world is that you need to be able to balance capitalist ideologies with socialist ideologies to create a functioning society. You can't have one or the other. Without the other, it's
extremes of anything.
Is just stupid. Yeah. Therefore, I think the right path lies somewhere in the middle, and our government should be balancing these ideologies that we've had through the last 100, 200 years into a functioning society. That's their job. That's what they get paid for. But they can't do it. Why?
No. Because there's a bigger overarching plan that doesn't want them to.
There you go. That'd be where that's what I'd agree with. Yeah, totally.
So back to this plan, this project. The Americans have been having think tanks and having had a good think about having this idea about maintaining their dominance for the next century. And it was written down. It was the plan is, and the words they use is they need a Pearl Harbor event.
Yeah, a Pearl Harbor type people catalyzing event that would get the American people supporting the invasion and occupation of natural resource rich Middle East countries that otherwise have no interest.
But if you want to catalyse an event, like you said, 9/11, beautiful. You couldn't have asked for any better.
No.
Countries around the world ran to their aid. The people of America kicked up. They then went on and did horrific things in Iraq. 100,000 innocent people were killed during the first year of the attack, and nobody batted an eyelid. They put through several laws, the Patriot Act, and so on and so on, that normally people would kick off about, and they went, well, yeah, but this is for our freedom, so we need them.
That's also interesting, isn't it, as well, the fact that they passed the Patriot Act, which, as long as the American government classes an American citizen as a terrorist, they have all of their freedoms removed.
Yep.
But what's to say that they won't misuse that classification?
The word, what can be classed as a terror act,
and then
you have home terrorists as well, and internal terrorists.
But then we also had another similar event in London on 7/7, which then, coincidentally after that, we then passed the same legislation as the Patriot Act, which allowed our government to do the exact same thing. Then you had the Madrid bombings in Spain, which allowed the Spanish government to do the exact same thing.
Yep.
And you start to see a pattern.
But, and the point of this video is, anybody that says my government wouldn't do that, we've just spent half an hour explaining to you that they would. They would. They've done it in the past, and we're going to have having a chat about whether they did it again.
Yeah.
Right, so, be afraid.
Be very afraid.
Your government is out to get you. No, it's not. So, anyway, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Please. That sounded a bit bacon.
It did, didn't it?
I was like,
Please, sir, some more.
We'd like some more. Cheers.
That's alright, that was good.